Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Same 24 Hours podcast. I am your ship captain and joyful host, Meredith Atwood. It's great to be here. I'm excited about our guest today. Gina DeVee is here. How are you?
I'm great, Meredith. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So I heard on your Instagram that you're in the process of moving. Is that true?
It is. It is. We are relocating to Miami.
Very nice. Very nice. I am an expert in moving in case you ever need any assistance with boxes or we have moved so much that I just sometimes I think I have a roll of tape in my back pocket, but well, I wish you all the best in that move. And so business, pleasure, both, is that why?
My husband just wanted to be in a place that was more open than California is right now. So, I think everything from, this past year has just had us rethink so many different areas of our life. And we've been in LA for over 15 years now. And we thought, it might be a fun change in Miami and we'll give it a try. So,
Yeah,
you know,
awesome.
found a
Well, that
place and we're out of here.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. So let's go back. Let's rewind a little bit to Gina as a teenager.
Oh,
I
okay.
want to go like where, so much of who we are is formed in childhood and teen years, and so much of who we are not is formed there because we realize,
Mhm.
oh, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to become someone else. So, how were you as a teenager or a child, and how has that shaped you into this whole concept of, man, we got to live as queens. We got to show up as our best selves. And like, did it come out of a hard place, or have you always just sort of had this innate ability to like live your best life?
No, 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 no. Of course, we teach what we want to learn. Um, my teen years were the first word that came up was boring. I was just your quintessential good girl, and I didn't do any of the teenage rebellion because I was just really confined, I guess, in terms of my own personal self-expression. I grew up in a pretty religious environment, and so that was pretty conservative. And the good part about that has been a through line in my life is that I've always had a really close relationship with God. So that and a strong faith. So that's very immersed and infiltrated into my queenhood today. But I think that I missed out on a lot of living life, which is why I'm even more motivated to live my best life today, because I was really stuck in good girl and getting it right and little Miss Perfect and playing by the rules. And it didn't have me discover like what's really true for me. I was really living so much by other people's rules.
I feel that with all of my being. I know this version very well, and I talk about it a lot. The term I use is people pleasing. I
Mm-hmm,
just wanted to make sure everyone was pleased with me and everyone was pleased
mm-hmm,
with themselves, and that has a great cost, right? I know for myself, I just didn't really know who I was. And so it took me until I was like, I don't know, 35, 38 to say, oh, I don't actually like that. Or this is, it reminds me of Runaway Bride, with that movie with Julia Roberts, where she's like, I don't know how I like my eggs, because she just ate her eggs however the men
uh-huh,
in her life
uh-huh.
did it. And it's not necessarily so much men as just the whole conglomerate of people. Like,
Mhm.
how do I like my eggs? I don't know. So part of your journey to figuring out who you were is also, you said, teaching what you want to learn.
Mhm.
So you knew somewhere deep inside of you, like, I've got to figure out how to rise and how to be more authentic of myself. So what did that look like, and how did it turn into your business and what you do to empower women?
Yeah, I would say it wasn't really a conscious thought. By grace, there was a real evolution and a real unfolding. So I, um, teenage years, whatever, went to a college that I didn't want to go to, but it was an in-state school and it was less expensive than the out-of-state school that I wanted to go to. It's like doing all of like the responsible things, the good girl things, and God bless my parents, but they thought that was what was best for me. And I just didn't have a strong sense of self. And then in my 20, well, I went to Washington. I worked in Washington for a while. So that was really um, a great experience, some of becoming, because I got out of the Detroit suburbs that I grew up in. I'm in Washington, D.C. I was at the White House and, around people that were thinking for themselves. And that started to wake me up. And then I went back to Detroit after that experience and met Marianne Williamson. And so
Ah,
her spiritual perspective, which was not contradictory to my religious upbringing, but it really broadened and expanded me um, out of everything being so literal. And so she had a huge impact in my life. And at that time, I mean, it still does, but that was that kind of the next evolution. And then I became a psychotherapist and I realized how confining that was. So I discovered life coaching. And I think it was really once I then moved to California, became a life coach, found internet marketing and business and entrepreneurship that, I always say, if you want the best personal development seminar on the planet, start your own business. And that is probably where the evolution and the unfolding came from, where I got to know myself. And, entrepreneurship is so confronting and challenging and wonderful and intense that when I started to learn what actually was possible, that there's more than enough money in the world for all of us, there's more than enough clients, like all the opposite of everything I'd ever heard or been taught. I thought that only professional athletes and rock stars could have those kinds of lives. And when I realized, like, basically entrepreneurs are the new celebrities, like gradually things started to open up. And then when I really learned that we are responsible for creating our reality, then I think it became more a conscious choice to be true to myself and create the life I love.
was there a moment where it clicked and you said, "Oh, I'm responsible for everything I've brought about and everything I bring about"? Like, I've had a couple of those moments where I'm like, "Oh, so this is actually me." Like, I'm in charge of and accountable, and this is my fault, and this is my job. And like, I've had a couple of those moments where it's not that I blame things, but it's always been like, oh, I have these theories about why that's just not happening. And this is why, and check, I'm not going to worry about that because that's how it's always been. And
Mhm.
so to realize that you can change anything, that past precedent is not indicative of what you can do or what you can accomplish. Like, and I realized it was me, it was my mindset. And it was a very clear moment. Did you have one of those moments, or was it like little pieces along the way revealed, like, oh, I'm in control of this, or I can take charge?
It's a great question. I mean, one of my big aha moments was when I learned about wealth consciousness and that I learned that I could create unlimited amounts of money. I think
Tell
that
me about this.
yeah, I mean, it was at the beginning of my journey, and I was totally broke. And someone invited me to a free Bob Proctor seminar called The Science of Getting Rich. And I'd never heard about wealth consciousness. Of course, like I had such a skewed relationship with money because I was taught you're not supposed to focus on it and it's bad and wrong, or if you get it, you're supposed to give it to other people who need it. But I was broke and $75,000 in debt. Like, but I didn't think of me being one of the people that needed it.
Hmm.
And credit cards are so for me, my money story was like the most confining at that time in my life. Was so now I was probably early 30s. Like anything I wanted to do was stopped because of a lack of money. And so learning, giving myself permission to create wealth and to have a healthy relationship with money, and not just like I had a very naive approach, like, well, if you're just a good person, then the money will come and God will provide. And, or if you're good at what you do, then the clients will just come. And so I was just very naive in that sense. And when I learned that, no, you decide, you create your desires, it's sort of the same thing but it just came very specifically in the form of money. And then being in the conscious business community, would learn the skills on how to take responsibility for what I was creating in every area of my life. And so I think that was probably more of a evolution than just an aha moment.
Yeah. And that's interesting you bring that up. I just talked to Rachel Cruz, who's part of the Ramsey
Huh?
empire, and she has a new book coming out. And we talked about money, and I often talk to people about body image and fitness. And it's interesting how money and body are often the biggest gateways into substantial change, because it's like how we treat money, how we treat our body is pretty much how we treat everything. And
Mm,
so when you kind of deal with one of those bleeders, if those are a bleeder, if your money's, an issue and
mhm,
your body is causing you any sort of grief, and you
mhm,
start to just look at it, that really I've seen with a lot of people I've interviewed and in my own life, substantial change tends to kind of snowball from that.
That's
Yeah.
an interesting connection.
Yeah. So you say that your mission is to show women everywhere how to be queen of their lives, that within every woman lives a queen, and only from that position of queen can you fulfill your purpose. I love that. So talk about that. How do we step into our throne?
Mhm.
And what does that look like? How many people run screaming into the night when you tell them that? Yeah, just
They don't scream it at me. I think I don't hear about it until they're like, "Oh, that's what it means." Well, so based on everything that we've talked about so far, this will make a lot of sense. So all of my work is based on the story of Queen Esther of Persia. So Christians know it from the Bible, Jews know it from Purim. Other people, when they hear it for the first time, think it's cool Cinderella story. And I had always, before I met Marianne, I had always read everything very literally in the Bible. And there was a time when I read the story of Esther for the, umpteenth time, and I really saw Esther's story as my own and as women's story everywhere. So, real quickly, for any of your listeners who may not know, the Esther was a Jewish orphan girl who her parents died in a war, and the Israelites were sent to Persia, where they were treated like second class citizens. And at that time, she had one living relative who she was staying with, and she felt safe and it was cool. And then the king of Persia wanted to get a new queen, so they rounded up all the young maidens of the land and threw them into the palace harem, where they had to prepare for a year with beauty treatments and special foods.
naturally,
Um,
right.
right. And then Esther, being the most unlikely candidate, historians say of about 2,500 women, was chosen to be the queen of Persia, unbeknownst to the king of her background and who she was. And right when she um, becomes queen, there's a law issued to kill, destroy, and annihilate all the Jews in the land. So Mordecai goes to her and he's like, Esther, for such a time as this, you've been called into royalty to save your people. You got to go to the king, tell him who you are, and get us saved. And at first she's like, no, 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 I can't do that. But then she says, okay, I will. And she goes and prays and fasts for 3 days, and then has the courage to go to the king, ask for her life to be saved. He saves it, and in my book, she becomes the heroine of all time. That's the instant coffee version of the story. So, where what my work is about, and why I know every woman is a queen, and why only from the position of queen can we fulfill our calling, is that on some level we are all that Jewish orphan girl. Whether we've been literally put up for adoption and orphaned, or we have been emotionally orphaned by mother or father or both. Like, so I started to look at the story metaphysically also, and like, wow, yeah, I can see where I feel orphaned, and I can remember the times where I felt exiled from that church or this group or whatever. And that Esther is not any more special than any of us, and that all of us are meant to be the queen of our lives in whatever form that takes. And all of us have our own, for such a time as this, level of importance, that it's like, especially right now, for such a time as this, like, what have you been called for? Like, what is your calling and what is your role? And you will only fulfill it if you are in the position of queen, because like the princess and the martyr and like all the other archetypes, they're not going to fulfill any of our callings. So
Mm.
that's where it all came from. And since we are all God's children, I know that there is a queen inside of us all.
Yeah, and the title of your book is The Audacity to Be Queen. So how does audacity come into this? Because it's like, oh my gosh, you dare to be queen? I mean, but
Yes.
yes, we must, right?
Well, if you're gonna be your real self, it's an audacious move, right? Like there's an audacity to reveal who you really are and what you actually think, and what your style preferences are. I don't mean fashion style. I just mean like life in general. So um, it takes real courage, to let your yes be yes and your no be no. There's an audacity to that. There's an audacity to dream big and to play as big as you want, and not be confined to what you think is probable or reasonable, or what other people are going to say about you. So yes, I entitled my book The Audacity to Be Queen: The Unapologetic Art of Dreaming Big and Manifesting Your Most Fabulous Life.
Yes, love it, love it. So you hit on, you said courage. Like it
Mhm,
takes courage to be audacious. It takes courage to step into who you really are.
mhm.
Why is fear such a big factor in our lives? I mean, obviously 100 million years ago is to keep us safe, or I don't even know if we were around that long. Not a historian here. But obviously fear has a real place in humanity. But when we're just saying, and I say just with my little air quotes, hey, step into yourself, live your purpose. Like when you look at that globally, it's like, okay, what are we afraid of? What is so terrifying? But I also know from my life in coaching women, everyone's afraid. We're all afraid. So, in your experience with working with women and the work you do, what is the number one fear? And what is your advice to help women move through that?
Um, it really does. It's some form of safety. I think women's number one fear, it's like, what are people going to say about me? And or they might use the words like, I'm afraid to be visible, but then it's still about, because of what are other people going to say about me.
Mhm.
um and back in the day, the way society controlled and oppressed women was to, if you did not confine yourself to the status quo, if you did not conform, then you were cast out. So you were kicked out of the tribe. And in those days, that meant you would either freeze to death or be eaten by a wild animal or starve to death. So you would literally die. Or, the witches that were burned, it was, if you didn't follow the status quo, then you would be killed. So that is in our cells and our psyches, that if we don't do what society wants us to do or what someone else wants from us, like it's not a rational thought, but the instinctual fear is, I'm going to die. And
Mhm.
so until more of us wake up consciously and use the psychological and emotional tools to get into present reality, when you investigate those fear-based thoughts, then you can dismantle them, then you can take your power back. And I write about this in my book a lot too, that the times that I've been most fearful is when I was afraid I was going to get ganged up on, or people are going to say stuff about me that was unattractive. And what I was doing in that moment, once I investigated them, I had to eat like pizza for 2 weeks and hide under the covers for a long time. Get
Now
the
you're talking my
wisdom.
language. I know this.
Yeah,
I know this part.
yes. What I realized is I was making these other people source. I was basically making them God. I like that they would declare if I was okay or not, or acceptable or not, or worthy or not, or whatever the story was. And so when you investigate your thoughts, I had a mentor teach me that reality is always kinder than your story about it. And when you get out of the story and into the reality, you're like, oh, wait, she can have her opinion, but it doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it, because well, her opinion of me doesn't mean that that's who I am or anything about any of it. So I've always found that when you return to source, when you return to spirit, that all peacefulness and the fear comes and the fear goes away. I could go on, but that's
No, you raise such a good point that oftentimes the truth is what we're avoiding, but the truth is really what will set you free. It may hurt, it'll drag you through the mud for a little bit, maybe. Boy, you really heard my Southern come out on that. But it'll, but once you look at the truth and you can see it laid out before you, oftentimes it doesn't line up with your story. The story is always so much hairier and worse.
Yes.
So one more question for you. This podcast is called The Same 24 Hours, meaning that we all have the same 24 hours in our day. It's just what we do with those 24 hours that leads to our greatest health, happiness, and success. So I like to ask my guest, what is something that you do on a regular basis, daily, if not mostly daily, that leads to your productivity, a health hack, anything that helps your 24 hours be most productive?
For sure is my spiritual connection. And it's the first thing I do in the morning. I do a practice called the Daily Dazzle. And the first thing I do when I wake up is I pray and I ask, Dear God, how do you want to dazzle me today? And it's my way of looking then throughout the day to see the form of communication that God wants to communicate with me. And when I feel in communication with God on literally a daily basis, then I am more peaceful, less stressed, less fearful, less reactionary, because I know it's all going according to his plan.
Oh, I love that. The Daily Dazzle. Did you come up with that? Is that yours?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
like it. I like it.
Yeah,
Very
well,
good.
yes, it was a download. I should say God came up with it, but I
I was
was
gonna say, yeah, I felt like that was, yeah. Well, Gina, it was so great to speak to you. You said you have a free gift for my community, so let's hear
yes.
about that.
Yes, yes, yes. Come on over to divineliving.com/audacity. And it is the free companion course to my book. You don't have to buy my book to get this, though I would love for you to
Buy
enjoy
the
that as
book.
well. It's there's videos, there's a Facebook group, there's worksheets, and there's just so much positive, empowering content to support you in being the queen of your life. So come on over and check it out, or you can follow me on Instagram at Gina DeVee.
Awesome. Yeah, I tell everyone to buy the book of my authors because as a fellow author, and I'm like, just go buy the book. Like that's our currency, man. You got you got to have sales. All right, Gina, we'll have a great move and I
Thank
wish you the
you.
best and I'll enjoy continuing to follow you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, and welcome to the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm Meredith Atwood, author of the book, The Year of No Nonsense. I'm a former attorney turned writer, speaker, and Ironman triathlete. Although right now, all I really like to do is lift weights. We all have the same 24 hours, but it's what we do in those hours that leads to our greatest health, happiness, and success. It's my goal to crack the code on a life of less nonsense so we can all make the most of our 24 hours.